Bob Schieffer sat down recently with former LBJ advisor Joe Califano to discuss his book, The Triumph and Tragedy of Lyndon Johnson.
I think when many people, young people especially, think of Lyndon Johnson, they have a hard time getting past Vietnam. But as you point out in the new foreword of the book that you wrote about him that has now been reissued, his legislative accomplishments were monumental to the point that we still live in Lyndon Johnson's America. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, we do. First of all, if a president today passes one or two laws over a 4-8-year term, we think it's achievement. Johnson passed hundreds of laws over the 3 Congresses. You look at education, health care, Medicare, Medicaid, thousands of community health centers around the country, the school lunch and school breakfast programs, and then people think of that, and of course civil rights.
You were his closest aide on domestic affairs. You were there from morning till late at night for 3.5 years. How did he do it?
He was focused. We knew what he wanted. And he said, you go out to me. You go out and get the best ideas from the brightest people. We never asked anyone what party they were from. And he said, I'll worry about the politics. He knew every senator, he knew congressman, but he also had a tremendous sense of always finding out what the opposition was going to do.
He just would not take no for an answer.
Not from anybody. And he had, he had a wonderful way with senators and congressmen. He wanted to put the first Negro, that was the term in those days, Andrew Brimmer, on the Federal Reserve Board. Russell Long, the chairman of the powerful Senate Finance Committee, was from Louisiana, had another candidate. Johnson called Russell Long over, said, I have a great candidate. He didn't tell him who it was, told him what all his qualifications. And he's from Louisiana, Russell, and Russell said, oh, great. Then he handed him the folder, and Russell Long opened it up. There was this black face of Andrew Brimmer. And Russell stopped for a minute, and he said, I want you to introduce him to the committee. And Russell said, I will, Mr. President, I will, and it was done.
You tell about the time that Senator Frank Church from Idaho was giving him this big lecture and kept quoting Walter Lippmann, the columnist of the day, with all these criticisms.
Church kept going on, and Johnson said, well, Frank, the next time you want a dam on the Snake River in Idaho, call up Walter Lippmann. He could also be very tough. I mean, he wanted to, the Hirshhorn Museum in Washington, Joseph Hirshhorn, a Latvian Jew, wants to give all the sculpture. Lady Bird loves it. Johnson's going to have the Hirshhorn Museum, but he wants it named after himself. Claiborne Pell, one of the great families going back to the Mayflower, is the chair of the subcommittee that's controlling this, and he won't report it out because he wants it named just the Smithsonian Museum. And Johnson calls Pell over. He said, Claiborne, I want the American people to see this sculpture. Now, the only way they're going to see this sculpture is if we name it after this guy. He said, I don't care what they call this museum. I don't care if they call it the Horse Museum. I want to give the American people a chance to see this sculpture. And Pell was so embarrassed he went back, changed his mind, and reported the bill out.
Some people in the Obama administration that you talk to, when you say, you're having trouble and all of that, but LBJ had worse problems than you do, and they would say to you, yeah, but it was a totally different time. The way Johnson operated wouldn't work today. Would it work today?
I think a lot of it would work today. You have to sit down with a Boehner, to use an example, and say, what do you need, John? Let's figure out who do you need and what do you need so we can get this through. And then, all right, make the deals, do the deals, give it to them.
You were one of the first people to criticize the movie Selma. You said it was simply historically inaccurate because, and as I looked at the trailers, it seemed that they were trying to make LBJ the heavy, one of the obstacles to passing the voting rights bill.
He said that's the most important bill I ever proposed and the most important act of my administration. He was a partner with Martin Luther King. The tragedy of the way that movie describes all the animosity between King and Johnson is that, well, one, it's not true, but number two, that's a fantastic story. A white Southern president and this great civil rights leader getting together, Johnson saying to King, you can help me with what I want to do in Congress up here. If you can find the worst place in the South, in Alabama or South Carolina or Mississippi or Louisiana, and get down there and get your leaders down there and get it on the radio, get it on television. And King found Selma. That had a tremendous impact. Those two guys together did something that otherwise would never have happened. And to lose that story, I think it's a tragedy. The real story is dramatic, and it was all available.
What do you think turned him around on civil rights? Because he grew up in the segregated South. He took the usual views. He generally voted the way other people in the segregationist South voted, and then he began to change. When did that happen, and why do you think that was?
By the time I got to him, he had changed. But I think he used to talk about his driver and his cook, who both were black, and would have to drive from Washington down to Texas, and there was no place they could stay on the road. They'd have to go to the toilet by the side of the road. They only some places where they could get gas or eat or what have you. He thought that was awful. I think that was one. I think teaching the Mexican kids in 1928-29 school year in Cotulla, Texas, poor Mexican kids, because he used to say, you know, I think he even said it publicly more than once, you know, you can't look in the eyes of a poor kid that knows he's hated, but doesn't know why the color of his skin would make him be hated. And, you know, he was incidentally quite, when people would say, why did you change your mind? What happened? What happened? He said, you know, not everybody in life gets a chance to change when they made a mistake. And I got that chance, and I'm going to use it. And if you get that chance, you use it.
Thank you very much. It's a very good book.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you.
We also want to note that Mr. Califano currently serves on the board of directors for the CBS Corporation. We'll be back in a moment.